Welcome to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. My name is Dave. Are you ready? Are you ready? Let's go. We're going to start the episode right now. Happy to have you here. Let's do this. All right, we're back with more great stuff around podcast editing and support. My name is Dave. Thank you for pressing play. Thank you for being here. First time here, welcome to the show. What's the idea behind the show? We want to connect podcast editors with podcasters and podcasters with editors and support people just like you. So if you're thinking about taking your skills as a podcaster, translating them into a side hustle, translating them into something that can generate some income for you, because you're already doing all the work, you might as well do it for someone else. Or you want to make a business out of this completely, this is the show for you. And if you're a podcaster going, how the heck do I find a good person to work with? Well, A, I have my hand up. I'd love to be that good person for you. But B, I'm going to bring on other podcast editing and support people to have them share their story and introduce you to what they do. I want to match you up like a dating service between a podcaster's needs and an editor with a podcaster. So that's what the show's about. If you've been here for all 53 episodes so far, thank you. You are my new best friend, and I owe you a coffee. Thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the show. And speaking of coffee, if you want to buy me a coffee, I love coffee and I drink a lot of coffee. So there's a Buy Me a Coffee link in the show notes. If you're interested, it's there. And it just helps to cover some of the cost of the show. You know how that goes. And it fills up my cup, which I love to fill up once in a while with some fresh coffee, which I'm going to do in a moment. But thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the podcast. Beyond editing ums and ahs, putting an intro and an outro on a podcast, calling it a day, there's more that we can serve our audience with. And I want to give you a new thing to think about that possibly you haven't considered as part of your services that you can offer to clients as a podcast editor and support person. What am I talking about? What about if you were the host of a podcast and you interviewed the person it's their show, but you interview them as a guest on their own podcast and you become a professional podcast host? Interesting. Have you thought about adding this to your array of different things that you offer to a podcaster? Well, maybe you should. And I'm hoping to convince you of it and maybe even consider it for your podcast editing and support services. So let's jump in. So I've uncovered a need through conversations with people reaching out to me at podcasteditingandsupport.com. And I've had some businesses reach out and say, Dave, we know we want a podcast for our business. We see the value in having content that reaches out to our clients and our customers. But our CEO, our boss, the owner of the company, doesn't have time to create a podcast from scratch, doesn't have time to arrange all the topics and the interviews. And we want them to focus on what they're good at. But we do see the value in a podcast, so we're stuck. How do we create a podcast with the voice of the owner of the business, the main person who is the person that everyone identifies as the head of the company? But how do we do that when they don't have time to do all the other stuff? And they're like, do you have any solutions? And one thing I suggested to them was, what if you hire someone like me to be the host of the show where I lead the conversation, lead the topics, lead the discussion, but the main person from your company is the co-host or the guest on the show. So I'm not there to bring attention to me in the moment as the host, as the interviewer. My job is to bring attention to the person who is too busy to do their own show, but wants to have a podcast. And this is an interesting thing because so often we default in podcast editing and support to the simple menial task that people hate to do. So again, taking out the ums, the ahs, taking out the silence, making it sound better, doing the Instagram posts and the artwork, and posting this podcast to the hosting site, sending it out to Apple and Spotify and Audible and all that stuff. And some of these tasks are becoming quite automated to the extent that people don't need editors to the same degree that they did in the past. So I'm seeing editors losing clients to technology and not thinking about how they can diversify what they do beyond the simple ums and ahs. And if that's all you do, I'm encouraging you to expand what you can do for your current clients and to bring in new clients, because simple ums and ahs are not that difficult to remove anymore with some of the amazing tools that are out there. So if you build your world on ums and ahs, you're going to find yourself in an interesting situation in the future where less people are going to need your services because there's tools that do that for you. So it's time to think bigger. It's time to think about what you can do. Now, being a host of someone else's show is interesting because you could be the host and the editor and the producer of the episodes in the podcast. You have like more skin in the game, and a relationship builds between you and the person you're interviewing for their podcast. It builds this trust in this relationship that can be a long-term relationship that could really be beneficial to you. And I don't think you've thought of this yet. And if you have, I'd love to hear what you're doing. But for the majority of us, I don't hear a lot of people talking about this. So that's why I'm doing it on this episode. I think that you could develop your skills as a host, create your own podcast, interview people, get good at it, take your skill set as a great interviewer and develop it into a service to your clients to help them have their own podcast without all the heavy lifting, without having to come up with the content, without having to organize the editing and the appointments and the calendar and all of the other stuff. And you simply show up, lead the conversation, and ask great questions. And it's not your podcast. It belongs to the person you're interviewing. A, because they're too busy to do this, or B, they just don't have the ability to pull all this together, and they're looking to you and saying, what does it cost just to hire you to be the host of the podcast that we run? And I think it's an opportunity that we're missing as editors and support people. Again, that's why I have the name of the show is Podcast Editing and Support Show, because it goes beyond the ums and ahs. We're here to support podcasters. And by being the host of somebody else's show, what a great way to support them. We can do all the information and all the work behind the scenes and make them look like a superstar and keep them podcasting, build a strong relationship, be their editor, be their support person, and the host of the show, all at the same time. Why are we not talking about this? And have you even thought about doing this and adding this to your array of services? So hiring a podcast host for a client-focused podcast is really a viable service that we can offer as a podcast editing and support business. This service can provide numerous benefits for clients looking to leverage their podcasting as a marketing arm of their business. So here's some key advantages. The benefits of hiring a podcast host to host a podcast for your show. First of all, the expertise and professionalism that we have. The more you edit for other people's shows, the more you fix other people's problems, the more you realize how you can make podcasting better, which means you're starting at a totally different level than somebody trying to start a podcast from scratch. You already have a wealth of knowledge by helping other people that you can bring to new clients and speed up their hopes and dreams of having a podcast for their business. And you could be a great host for them. Leverage your expertise and your professionalism. A professional host brings in experience and skills to the podcast, ensuring high quality content and a great delivery. You do it more often than they do it, so that would make you the expert in the room. A podcast host can then guide conversations effectively, ask insightful questions, and maintain audience engagement, and make your guest on their own show to be the superstar. Leverage your expertise and your professionalism by being a host on somebody else's podcast on a recurring basis. Another thing we can offer is time-saving abilities for your clients. Think about how many podcasters would love to have a show, but they don't have the time to do this. They're business people, they're coaches, they're doctors, they're lawyers, judges. They're busy doing what they do that brings income into their family. Real estate agents. There's people who are just way too busy doing the thing to do all the other things that go behind the scenes. That's why we're here, to support them as an editor and a support person. But to be the host of the show that they want to have for themselves allows them even more time savings. By outsourcing the hosting role of the podcast, clients can focus on their core business activities while still reaping the benefits of having a podcast that works in the background to bring more people to them. This allows them to leverage the marketing potential of their own podcast, hosted by you as a support person, without investing significant time in production and all of the execution behind the scenes. It just makes sense. There's also an enhanced brand recognition of hiring somebody to host your podcast for you and do all the heavy lifting on your behalf. A skilled podcast host coming in to run the show, run the conversation, do all the work behind the scenes can help build a brand recognition by consistently representing the client's values and message, understanding the tone of the company and the business or the coaching program. This all contributes to creating a really strong brand identity through the podcast medium. As well, we can also provide improved content quality for the podcast as the host on their show. Professional hosts are adept at creating engaging content, which can lead to higher listener retention and growth. We can also help to attract new clients and build a loyal audience. We can help them not just in the words we say, but everything that goes with podcasting. Because we do it for our clients, we do it for ourselves. So why aren't we doing it for others? There's also the opportunity to do more networking by being the host on someone else's show. Experienced hosts often have connections in the industry, potentially leading to more high-profile guests, expanded network opportunities, new clients. Imagine this conversation. Hey, Bob, I heard you have a new podcast. It's great. Who's the host of your show? Oh, I hired Stan. Well, who's Stan? Well, Stan's my editor, my support person. He's also the host of my show. He interviews me on my own podcast. I don't have to worry about anything. He asks me these great questions. He sets them up. They're always a strike right across the plate. I can just follow him as a host of the show. We have a theme for the episode. I have my big picture that I want to make sure that I touch on these 3 points. And he leads the conversation, Stan does, on my podcast. And I don't have to do anything but just show up and answer the questions that Stan poses to me for my own show. And people are like, what's Stan's phone number? I want a podcast. I don't have time to do all this. Can Stan do this for me? Sure. We now have the potential to be talked about behind our back in a good way. Stan, congratulations, Stan, whoever you are. You just now have more than one client simply by being the host of someone else's show. It's a great way to network with people. So what is the viability of hosting someone else's show? There's 5 different things that we can do. So here we go. Offering podcast hosting services. Now, don't confuse this with your hosts like Buzzsprout, Captivate, Spotify for Creators, Libsyn, Podbean, Blueberry. Those are podcast hosts. They take your files, they distribute them to Apple and Spotify and Audible. That's also considered a host, which gets confusing because now I'm talking about the host, the actual, hi everybody, welcome to the podcast, my name is Dave, that kind of host. We can offer podcast hosting, being the person on the mic, interviewing the person for their show. We can be the host. By offering this as a service, we can be a valuable addition to a podcast editing and support business for several reasons. First of all, we could be a comprehensive solution to, I don't have time to be a podcaster. We can provide a more complete package to clients covering all aspects of podcast production. We can be the go-to person who does it all. We don't just edit, take out the ums and ahs, but we host the show, we promote the show, we do everything behind the scenes. And the person who's overly busy doing life, selling houses, coaching clients, writing books, hearing court cases, serving the public, whatever they do, they don't have time to do all this. We could be the answer to their lack of ability to start a podcast. We can be the comprehensive solution to, I don't have time for this, but I need it. So why aren't we stepping up? Another thing we can do is we can help to increase our revenue streams. If you build a whole podcast editing and support business around taking out ums and ahs, you could be replaced in the future. And I've heard people who, that's what they do. I throw on intros and outros, I do a quick edit, I post it and put it out there to the world, and that's it. And that's all they offer. There are more tools coming that are going to make this less valuable in the future. So don't build your world on something simple and easy to do and be replaceable. Increase the revenue streams coming into your business by adding hosting services. This can really diversify your income and potentially increase your overall revenue for your business as a podcast editor and support person. Are you telling me that a real estate agent that sells 5 to 10 houses a week and making thousands of dollars would not pay for your time to host their show, edit their show, promote their show, produce their show? And all they have to do is show up. They can do it from the car. They can do it from a showing at a house. And they're there and they can just quickly jump on and answer some questions and you do the rest. Don't you see the value in that as an offering to potential clients? Increase your revenue stream. Diversify. Have more ways for people to pay you and put money in your hand than simply ums and ahs. Increase your revenue streams by being the host of someone else's podcast. Also, client retention. By offering more than just ums and ah removal, we become a real full service solution to people, including hosting, and that can improve the client satisfaction and also retention rates. We can build our audience and our client base by simply increasing to fill the gaps that we're finding in the world. And this might be a gap that you've never considered, to be the host of somebody's show. Also, there's a demand in the market for podcasting right now. As podcasting continues to grow and as a marketing tool, there's an increased demand for professional podcast services, including finding somebody to host the podcast for the business and for the person. And you could be that answer. So as the market changes and adapts and adjusts over time, you could be the solution someone's looking for, but you don't even have it on your website as an option. Be the host. Give your services and take over and be the host of the podcast and serve your audience and serve your clients in this way. It's very unique. There's also the last part of this under the visibility of a service offering. We talked about comprehensive solution. We talked about increasing your revenue stream, retaining your clients. The market is demanding services like this. The last part is just the synergy with the existing services that you already offer. Hosting services, being the host of somebody else's podcast, being the person on the mic, the voice of someone else's show, complements any existing editing and support offerings that you already have, which can help create more of an efficient production process overall for what you do as a podcast editor and support person. So by incorporating podcast hosting into your service offerings, you can actually provide added value to your clients while expanding your business model in the growing podcast industry. And I just think it's about time for us to start thinking outside of the box of ums and ahs. Almost anyone can take out an and an ah. How do we make you stand out? We talk about the podcast editing and support community being quite competitive and that people are always looking for the next thing. So what makes you stand out? I can tell you that removing ums and ahs does not make you stand out. I can find you hundreds and hundreds of people who can take out ums and ahs. I can find you and point you to software that does it as well, where they don't even need you anymore. So we need to think about how we can create an environment where more people want our services because we offer different services. So jump on this. I'd love to hear if you do this already or if you're thinking about it. I'd love to hear if you take action on this and you actually put this into place and what it's like when your first client reaches out and says, I'd like to talk to you about hosting my show. Would you be okay? Can I hire you? I see on your website you offer hosting services. Can you tell me more? And I want to hear the story of you putting this into practice and what it meant for your business. That'd be great to celebrate with you. Always love to hear your voice. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Let's connect. And I'm wishing you well in your business as you continue to grow your podcast editing and support business. Thanks for listening to the Podcast Editing and Support Show. Visit us at podcasteditingandsupport.com. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. We would love to help you find a great podcast editor, or if you want to hire us, we would love to work with you. Podcasteditingandsupport.com. Catch you on the next episode. Take care.